Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this game's worth your time and bandwidth. Today's game is Robocop Rogue City. It's your move, creep. Does this semi-open world shooter capture the brilliance of Paul Verhoeven's satire, or is it more like the awful Robocop 3? Let's find out. Robocop Rogue City is a first-person shooter mixed with some light policing and RPG stuff, where you play as the part-man, part-machine himself, Robocop. The story takes place after Robocop 2 and retcons Robocop 3 out of the picture, with a new Kingpin gang lord showing up in Detroit. Robocop and Lewis are tasked to bring him down, but for some reason this new guy can mess with Robocop's programming, implying there's something going on behind the scenes. The story does a decent enough job of mimicking the black comedy and satire of the original, even if the story itself isn't particularly compelling. The mystery itself takes a little too long before it starts getting good, and its payoffs aren't particularly satisfying, but to be fair, it does a pretty good job incorporating the late-stage capitalism jokes the series is known for. Your time as Robocop will be split between two activities: patrolling the streets during side quests or stopping crimes, and blowing away creeps in spectacular linear fashion. See, this game is structured more like a Bethesda light style experience, with you being tossed into a smallish open world zone full of side quests, often crime related, that you have to deal with across a map. These involve talking to characters as well as actual investigations using Robocop's Witcher sense, though all are mostly pretty simple. Of course, this is Detroit, so things usually end in a massive gunfight, which honestly play more like a light gun game than a traditional first-person shooter. Robocop is a walking tank. He can't even crouch or jump, so instead you rely on fast shooting and your insane firepower to narc crooks. You have your trusty sidearm, which you can upgrade with a sort of pipe dream-esque puzzle system later, but can also pick up dropped weapons for even more carnage, as well as grab environmental hazards or even enemies themselves to toss around. Enemies explode in gore and dismemberment, so even if you aren't mobile like Doom Guy, the combat packs a punch. After finishing a zone, you'll go back to the station and be graded based on how much side stuff you did, and then it's off to the next area. All this feeds into a light XP system, which can grant Robocop a variety of powers like shields, a dash, time slowdown, and so on. And honestly, that's the entirety of Robocop Rogue City. It's a simple but surprisingly accurate Robocop experience, with plenty of over-the-top violence paired with social satire. So what did I like about Robocop Rogue City? Well, the game is very reverent of its source material. It's great they got welders back to play Robocop, and the world is definitely a perfect reflection of what you see in the movies, paired with the bulky gameplay that really makes you feel like you're in Robocop's helmet. And speaking on the gameplay, the shooting is surprisingly satisfying despite being pretty basic. As I mentioned, it feels more like Time Crisis than Halo, but that makes sense considering the character, and feeling obscenely overpowered 90% of the time is how I should feel as a super cop. And lastly, I thought Detroit looked fantastic. While some of the character models are certainly janky, the environments themselves are peppered with tons of really interesting details, and really made the whole thing feel lived in. When it comes to the bad, I really wish this story were stronger. The side missions and Weller's film performance were enough to keep me going, but I didn't find the main story particularly compelling at all, and really lacked the wit and bite that the first two Robocop movies had. Additionally, there's some low-budget frustration here that pops up fairly often, such as the small number of areas, a lot of weird balance issues in both stat building and enemies, which starts to show the cracks in the design. And lastly, I encountered more than a few bugs, from performance dips to clipping and engine issues, strange shadow flickering, and more. The whole thing definitely feels more than a bit janky, which makes sense considering the other games this dev has made. As you know, I rank games here on a 3-point scale: must play, maybe consider, and don't bother. And while I don't give number scores, I would say it's one of the best 7 out of 10 games I've played recently. I have a massive soft spot for AA games that adhere to a vision without compromise, and Rogue City does a fantastic job of being both relevant to its source material and making a fun and interesting game to go around it, even if it's a bit janky. While it isn't going to win any awards, if you have any affinity for Robocop or just extreme bullet violence, absolutely buy this for $1 or $60. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you played Robocop Rogue City, do you enjoy the Robocop movies, please let me know what you think in the comments, and regardless, go out there and maybe give this one a look.